Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by a husky Harry, huggable homos who love film. Try saying that 5 times fast. I can't. To bring you some movie review goodness. Sometimes we do movie news, but this week we decided to forego movie news so we could bring you not one, but 2 horror movie discussions. We're going to be discussing Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, as well as the new Aronofsky film Mother. And if you just made the mental connection between Psycho and Mother, good on you. In any event, let me introduce you to my fantastic co-hosts who are going to help us unpack these 2 movies, talk them through. Jim Puliafka, welcome to the show.
Thanks, babe, and welcome to the podcast, everybody. And no, my mother wasn't a psycho mom, but she had her moments, but no, not a psycho mom.
Well, that's good at least. Mm-hmm. Will Lindis is here with us as well. Welcome, Will.
Whew, hey there, gang. Sorry if I sound a bit rushed. I just got out of the shower.
At least you made it out alive. What? Welcome. Glad to have you here, Will. And hey, we are super pumped. We are super excited. We've got the old Movie Bears podcast gang back together this week. Please give a heartfelt welcome to the sexy voice of the Movie Bears podcast. I'm not even going to try to imitate his voice. I'll let you hear it yourself. Chris Lopez, welcome back.
Hey, Brad. Thanks for having me here. Good to see everybody. And yeah, good to be on the Movie Bears podcast once again.
And I have the tingles from that voice. I won't lie.
He's if we were a band, he'd be the bass, right?
Oh yeah, definitely the bassist.
The big bottom end. Is that what we call it?
Oh,
big bottom.
All right.
Big bottom end.
Oh boy.
That's what the
And
bottom
it's
end.
on.
That's what
We
the
are
bass
off
is
to the
called.
races. Yeah.
I am part Cuban, so my bottom end has been remarked on several times.
Oh.
Well, as someone who has seen your bottom end, it is noteworthy. In any event, hey, we've got 2 movies to review this week. How do you guys feel about just diving right in, just getting started right off the bat?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's do this.
All for it.
All right, awesome. So here's what I'll say. Normally, not Normanly, normally, we would talk about a movie spoiler-free for 10 or 15 minutes and then give you a fair warning before we go to spoiler town. With Psycho, it is going to be all spoilers all the time. The movie's been out for 57 years. If you haven't seen it yet, I don't know how that's possible, but if you haven't seen it yet and you are worried about spoilers, this is me awkwardly rambling, so you can step away if you need to. Come on back in about 25 minutes or so for our discussion of Aronofsky's Mother. But we're going to dive right into Psycho, full of spoilers. If you haven't seen it yet, again, take that time. Otherwise, everybody into the shower, because here we go. Our discussion of Psycho. All right, so Jim, this movie has been out for a very long time. We are safely assuming that pretty much anyone who's listening has probably seen Psycho. But even so, there may be that one person out there who's never seen it for some reason. Give us the basic setup of Psycho, if you don't mind. And, you know, I know we rewatched this recently. Maybe tell us a little bit about your thoughts. Does this movie still hold up for you, or where do you come in?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about Psycho, right? From 1960. This is Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Kind of the granddaddy of all, one of the granddaddies of like psychological horror, a little bit of slasher horror in there, but more psychological than anything else. Directed by Alfred Hitchcock, written, adapted from a novel by a guy named Robert Bloch, which I didn't know till I just read the IMDb summary, but stars Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates. Anthony Hopkins, that would be cool. Young Anthony Hopkins.
Maybe in the remake on the remake.
Yeah.
There you
go. Janet Leigh is Marion Crane. It's got Martin Balsam in here, which was awesome to see him show up. Really prominent character actor from that time and beyond. But yeah, we recently got to see this one again Well, let me read the plot synopsis, and then we'll dive right in. And as like most terrible things, this one originates in Phoenix. A Phoenix secretary embezzles $40,000 from her employer's client, goes on the run, and checks into a remote motel run by a young man under the domination of his mother. So yeah, this one we had binged. Well, not really binged, but we watched through all, was it 5 seasons, babe, of Bates Motel, and got all the way from the beginning to the end. And we really kind of dug that series for several reasons. But we definitely said at some point partway through that series that we need to go back and watch Psycho, because the Bates Motel series is just based kind of all around that universe of the Bates, the family, the Bates family, the mother, how Norman got to be how he is, and all the characters that kind of surround that. And they made some changes, but going back to the roots was a lot of fun. And one of the things I noticed in Psycho this time around was, everybody remembers the shower scene and the house and the mother and Norman and that kind of, and all that stuff really is kind of like the second half of the movie. This is like a whole half movie that happens before we even get to any of the creepy Norman Bates stuff. And it involves, this embezzlement of $40,000 from her employer, and she's on the run and she's hiding out. And it's kind of a strange mashup of things where you have kind of this crime noir thing going on, and then it just kind of lurches into the horror and the psychological horror with Norman Bates and everything. I really enjoyed watching it again because there were parts of it that I'll be honest with you, I didn't even remember had happened. It had been so long, but I'm glad we caught up with it again. Brad, what did you think?
Well, one thing I'll say here is, Jim, you mentioned the $40,000 that was stolen. I actually just pulled up an inflation calculator to give us an approximation of how much money Marion Crane would have stolen if this happened today. And that works out to about $335,000 in 2017 money. So
nice.
$40,000, whatever, it's a nice chunk of change. But 336,000 definitely is what that equates to today. So maybe that sets the scope a little bit. Chris, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on Psycho, because I don't think that's a film we've ever talked about with you before. Is that something that's kind of in your wheelhouse, your pantheon, or where do you come down?
Psycho is one of the movies that I watched a really long time ago. Not going to date myself, but it's funny how Jim brought up the whole beginning of the movie and the $40,000 embezzlement, and I had totally forgotten about that when I rewatched this, and I saw that coming up, and I was like, oh man, that's right. It just totally slipped my mind.
Is this the extended version? What is this? Yeah.
And so going into it, it was interesting to see that, at least the setup. And I'm not like a huge fan of old movies. I tend to think that a lot of the acting is very stilted and very different than what we're used to in today's cinema. But seeing Psycho, I thought the characters acted a little more naturalistically than I was expecting, I guess. And so it was really a fun watch. The characters are they're like very particular sort of people, and it is really interesting to follow their story, and getting through the car and then finally getting into the motel. I thought the movie was kind of shot. It looked pretty standard up until that point, but then Hitchcock starts playing around with a lot more camera angles, and a lot of cool shots start coming in into play. The shower scene is super famous, but this. As soon as the shower scene is up, there's this sort of zoom into the drain and zoom out on Vivian Lee's eyeball, and it's rotating, and she's on the kitchen or on the bathroom floor, and has a lot of really cool visual effects like that. You'd mentioned that it has slasher elements, one of the things that I remarked on to Jason when I was watching this was the surprising sort of lack of blood. After like 30 stab wounds, there's like 5 spots of blood.
Drops, yeah.
But all in all, I thought that the tension was really neat. It ramped up. I mean, everyone, has seen it or, is rewatching it for the umpteenth time at this point. But it was still a treat to see again and to see how everything played out. The ending was especially nice to me, I think, because the cops were kind of like, oh, this weird pervert or whatever, and the psychologist comes out and defends Norman. It's like, not really a transvestite, not doing this for sexual reasons. He's doing this because he's just plain messed up in the head. So don't lump gay people and stuff into that category, which I thought was pretty cool and probably progressive for the time. Who knows? And so yeah, all in all, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I had really enjoyed that part with when the detective is kind of laying it out, like Norman's motivations and his state of mind, and it was very in depth for the movie. Like they didn't just say, "Oh, he's crazy." Like he went on for 5 or 6 minutes explaining what people who have this this affliction, what they go through and what their state of mind is, and it was pretty fascinating. I again, that was another part that I think I had totally forgotten about until I rewatched the movie.
Yeah, it was like a mini psychology lesson at that point.
Yeah, hence, I mean, it makes the name of the movie, right? I mean, now you say, "Oh yeah, Psycho." I get it. Now I get what they're doing.
So this may be humor. I'm not sure. There's a crazy wall of text discussion in the live chat right now. So if you haven't jumped into the live chat yet, feel free. Come on in, join the conversation. But a couple of the guys are talking back and forth about how the 1960 Psycho apparently was the first time a toilet was ever seen on screen in a film. A little bit of trivia there. So thank you guys for reminding us of that. And then, of course, ever the trickster, Craig says, really, for a movie that came out in 1998, I thought a toilet would have been seen on film much sooner. Of course, he's being funny. But it does remind me that, of course, there was a remake of Psycho that came out once upon a time back in the 90s. And so I don't know if you guys want to talk about that at all at some point. We certainly can if you have a thought. But I had totally forgot about the remake until literally just this moment. So live chatters, thanks for reminding me of that nightmare.
Yeah. I don't think I ever saw the Gus Van Sant version of Psycho.
Ooh, well,
and there are a couple of these shot-for-shot remakes of movies that have not really turned out all that well. So I don't know if we're ever going to be done with those, but that one, I mean, I didn't see it, so I can't pass judgment on it, but word of mouth was not very good. And Carrie, I did see the Carrie remake that was even more recent than that. That was definitely not good, even though it was a shot-for-shot remake, just with different actors. So. Yeah.
Well, Edward, thank you for the toilet trivia in the chat. And JP Wendell, Jim, to you says, you probably don't have to worry about going to see that because there's a good reason. Apparently, I totally forgot about it. So
Jim, I might be a Gus Van Sant completist. I do like his other films, so maybe I go back and see if he added any of his specific touches.
Sweetheart, you feel free to watch that on your iPad in bed.
Or on the plane. Yeah.
There you go.
Of all the things you can download and listen to on the plane or watch on the plane, we could probably come up with the list of 50 more deserving titles than the Gus Van Sant remake, which, I mean, to its credit, the thing about it is an actual shot-for-shot remake. There's a couple of shots they have to change a little bit because of just they don't work the same way with the same technology and what have you. So as a film, it's pointless because we have this other movie that does the exact same thing and did it, in this case, 40 years earlier. But as an academic study of the shots themselves, it's interesting to watch, but no, I wouldn't go out of my way to see it. I would rather. Oh, go ahead, Brad.
I was just going to say, I think this is the perfect segue, Will, into kind of your thoughts on the original. Then, if this doesn't really, fit the bill, how did you feel about the original?
Oh yeah, the original is one of the best films of its type. There's a period, or let's call it, there's an exclamation mark after that sentence, in fitting with our theme this week. What's so great about Psycho is that it's a fairly cavalier film. This is Hitchcock coming right off of North by Northwest, which was a much more broadly appealing film. And he goes into Psycho and really decides to subvert and transgress as much as he can. You mentioned the trivia about a toilet sequence, like a toilet being seen on screen. That's something that had never happened before, and he put it in there because he wanted the not only does the toilet appear, but guys, we see a flushing toilet, like we see an actual toilet being used. That was a ballsy move. We also see a fully nude Janet Leigh in this movie. And granted, she's shot in angles that, you don't get to see a whole lot. But you do get to see way more than this prestigious actress would have normally shown in other movies. In fact, there are sequences in the quick cut, in the infamous shower sequence, where her body double, they had like an adult pinup model who was her body double, where if you freeze frame at the right point, like there's bare tit on screen, and that's something that also didn't happen, and Hitchcock made that work. What I love so much about this movie is you can kind of divide it into three parts. And Jim, you mentioned before that there's this story arc up front that is, it's groundbreaking. You've got Janet Leigh on the run. She's stolen this money, and she's trying to decide, like, what am I going to do with it? I want to, I don't feel appreciated. I want to make sure that me and Sam have this life together, or what have you. She's weighed down by paranoia and by fear over the actions. And we actually get to see her. My favorite scene in the movie is actually not the shower scene or the reveal at the end. There's this really, really simple, like, back and forth conversation right before the shower sequence where it's just Norman and it's just Marion, Janet's character, and they're sitting in the room, and you've got those creepy taxidermy animals all over the place, and she's questioning him about why doesn't he go out and do more things, and that's where he first brings up the specter of Mother. And it's in this sequence where we get to see Janet make the decision, like, you know what? I'm going to go back tomorrow. I'm going to take the money back. We have a resolution to her story arc. We always talk about, like, how it's so startling that we have this character who died, like a main character dies midway through the movie, but they're able to do that while also fully resolving her story arc. Her arc was about, like, this decision that was weighing on her head, and she had resolved to go back the next day. That's powerful, and that's amazing that he was able to do that. Then we have the shower sequence, which is one of the best scenes in all of film, just because of how brilliantly it was storyboarded and edited. You have the sharp music cues, which have inspired everything that when we watch a Blumhouse movie nowadays and we get that shrieking sound with the jump scare, we can owe a lot of that to Psycho. The quick edits, like there are a lot of really quick edits in that scene that hint at quite a lot without showing a whole lot. We see some skin. We see at one point a knife being drawn across a belly, but everything else is just quick cuts and suggestions of stabbing. But when you watch it the first time, you actually feel like you're watching a woman getting brutally stabbed. That's the power of editing. And then the last third of the movie dives into all of the other characters all show up and deal with Norman, and you kind of get the reveal on Mother and all of that stuff. He kills another dude. Like, all of that is so good by itself, but it works especially well because it's resting on the shoulders of the first half. I love this movie. It's I mean, I think I'd still probably put Vertigo as my favorite Hitchcock movie, but Psycho is definitely right up there. I think you can skip the Gus Van Sant version. I think you can. I think there are like what 3 sequels to Psycho, like actual sequels. I haven't even seen all of those, so you know maybe they're great masterpieces, but I have not gone into Psycho 3 and Psycho 4. But yeah, Psycho is a wonderful movie. If you haven't seen it yet, I think the reason why some people may have skipped seeing it so far is I think there are people that, and this happens with the older movies, like you've seen enough references to the film, like you've seen it parodied to death, and you feel like you don't need to see it because you've seen the exaggeration of it. You've seen the you've seen it as a trope, you've seen it bled into the zeitgeist, all of that stuff. I think Psycho, even if you're familiar with all of the story beats, if you've like seen all of the references, this movie still holds up. Like you can watch this right now and have a really visceral, very intense feeling from this almost 60-year-old movie. That's brilliant. I love Psycho.
Yeah, the two. I guess there were two. Well, maybe there were more than 2 sequels. It was definitely they started in '83 with Psycho 2. I'm reading this, by the way. There was a Psycho 3 in '86, and there's several of them. Psycho 4
was like
the beginning.
The TV movie, I think, was the 4th one. Yeah.
And then of course we have the latest series, which started in like, was it 13, babe? 2013?
Something like that. It wrapped over the spring, I think.
Which we enjoyed.
Yeah, and in fact, Jim, you had mentioned earlier that we've been watching that series, and we finished it. And what's interesting, Will or Chris, did you watch Bates Motel at all?
I haven't watched Bates Motel. I feel like I probably should have. I avoided it because I was worried that it might impact how I felt about the movie. But it sounds like it's maybe actually pretty decent.
Yeah, I think it's a good series. I mean, but I think it, like I said, I think it fills in kind of. I think it tastefully fills in that story. It does overlap it a little bit, and that's where we might have issues. But otherwise, I thought the filling stuff was pretty good. They also set it in a more modern time, obviously. Right.
So definitely, if you're kind of hoping that the series like leads right into the old black and white movie, the series has been updated, and but there's definitely some cool dovetailing that it does. I don't want to say any more than that because it is really an incredible series. Will, I think you would dig the hell out of it. So maybe worth checking out at some point. But the series definitely got me in the mood to go back and revisit Psycho, which of course is probably partly what it's meant to do. I didn't realize how much of the original movie I had entirely forgotten, I guess. I think my memory picks up when she gets to the hotel, when Marion Crane drives up. And I knew that she had this money that she was like wrapping in the newspaper to try and hide it. But like you guys, I guess I had totally spaced like the whole first third of the movie. It may have also been because I originally saw it at a drive-in theater in my pajamas when I was like 6. I could have been sleeping in the bed of the truck for the beginning of the movie. I don't know. Jim's making faces, but I don't know. In any event, you would think that because this movie is as old as it is, right? It came out in 1960. That going back and revisiting it now, that maybe the movie would feel like out of place in time, not really relevant. I'll tell you what. Going back and watching this movie, I mean, I felt like, I don't know, there are probably many people like Norman Bates that are running little motels out in the cute country that you might stop and check into at any point. So, Jim, unfortunately, we are no longer checking into tiny little bed and breakfasts when we travel, because you never know who's going to come kill you in the shower or in your sleep. But it's just so funny going back and seeing this now, because I do feel that it's relevant. But B, I think not just the TV series, but there's just so much that this movie has impacted in our culture. There are obviously a lot of pop culture references to this out there. But even just in how like the murder scene is filmed, like I forget what we were watching, but there was like a really violent stabbing in a film a couple months ago. And like, as I'm watching Psycho, I'm like, oh my God, this is like that stabbing scene in that other movie that we saw, where it's like you don't even necessarily see the body, you just see the hand and the knife like coming from different directions. And so I think it's pretty incredible that it has influenced so much. In fact, one of the things I'm really excited for, which we're gonna hopefully get to see at Fantastic Fest coming up here in a few days, is a new documentary entirely about this shower scene from Psycho, and that documentary is called 7852. So it's kind of interesting, Jim, how like we watched Bates Motel, which led us to Psycho, and then the Fantastic Fest schedule dropped, and this movie's on there. Are you guys, Chris? I know, unfortunately, you won't be there with us, but are you guys looking forward to 7852?
Oh, yes. I am. That's definitely on my list. You know, I love learning about filmmaking, and this is going to be like one of those like filmmaking nerds. I'm not a filmmaker, but just it's intensely interesting to me to see how those things are put together, what the thought process might have been in those scenes, not just in that one shower scene, but the whole film and the ideas behind it. So yeah, it's on my list for sure. Will says he may have seen it, right?
Well, this is one. This is one that maybe I have, maybe I haven't. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to say anyways. This is one that's actually been on our radar kind of collectively for a little bit, because this was originally on the lineup for South by Southwest. Yep. And I remember us having conversations like, I can't wait to see 7852. I can't wait to see 7852. We get the book. Oh, 7852. And between the time that the book was printed and the lineup went live, it had gotten pulled from the South by Southwest lineup, which happens. That happens with films sometimes. And so it became this like white whale, this like film that we needed to track down. So yeah, the timing of this is perfect. We've got this festival coming up. We've got this this documentary playing at this festival about this movie that ties into this show that thematically fits with this other movie we're going to review. This was the perfect time for us to revisit Psycho.
Yeah.
Definite kismet going on there. Hopefully I can join you guys for Fantastic Fest one year. I think that'll be so much fun.
You need to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, one thing I wanted to talk about this movie, as I'm watching it, I was thinking, was it kind of edgy? I know there was a lot of things about this movie that are edgy, literally and figuratively, but having a female in 1960 be kind of the lone perpetrator of like a robbery like this, or a crime or embezzlement, to me, that I'm thinking back to like, and I'm not a huge old movie buff, but was that something that there was a lot of back then, or was this something that he was on the edge with? And was what eventually happened with her kind of some kind of statement, like, you're like, not,
if you're a woman, don't steal money.
Not necessarily a woman, but like, just, this is your payback, man or woman. Like, you're a bad person, you stole the money. And it is ironic that she agreed to maybe return it just before she actually got killed. But was it kind of him kind of playing with the idea of like, you get what you pay for kind of thing? There's some ideas to be explored there, and probably other people have much clearer ideas on that, but it's just something sticking in my head.
It wasn't just the money though, right? I mean, she was sleeping around with a married man, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Huh?
She was a hula.
Yeah. Yeah, she was.
And this is the type of thing that I think you're right. Like, the female criminal is not new to Hitchcock himself. Like, there were a lot of, like, you would see that a lot in noir, like, the female character with like the
femme fatale.
Yeah, the femme fatale, or she's got like the double agenda or something like that. But a lot of that was more tied to, and just sexual politics of the time, like, her sexuality being the evil. In this one, I actually don't see this as necessarily, and maybe I'm on an island on this one, but I didn't necessarily see this one as judging her as good or bad for her actions. What I like so much about this movie is it's almost like to the mind of this killer, like her struggle, her obstacle, her crime and her redemption, it didn't matter. And I think there's something kind of powerful about that. Not only did it not matter, but like we actually have this shot of the money going into the car, which goes into the water. Like, this MacGuffin, this thing that we're meant to follow, it's just gone. It doesn't matter. It never mattered. Because what mattered is this woman was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and she aroused this man who ended up killing her.
He had some emotional issues going on.
He had some emotional issues, yeah.
Just discuss.
That is the understatement of the episode.
When thinking about that, I thought it was more sort of the time making movies like this. Like maybe they really couldn't show terrible things happening to completely innocent people, so they had to introduce these sort of gray morals or sort of evil actions to sort of justify that to the audience at large, because I don't know how they would have reacted to seeing a true hero getting slaughtered like that, just without reason.
That's a great point, Chris. I think there's definitely something to that. Like, she obviously had at least questionable morals, so to an audience, not that they wanted to see her get killed, but it's not as necessarily as out of place as seeing a total innocent get slaughtered in front of them.
Yeah. And we've got a great reminder from Todd in the live chat. Hey, Todd, who says, remember, guys, Mother killed Marion Crane, not Norman. So
absolutely,
we need to be careful with our.
Yeah, that's a very true statement.
Yeah, and the whole idea of him, obviously he had multiple. Was it identity dissociative disorder or something like that? I forget what it's called. We saw it in Split as well, right? In the movie Split. They mentioned the same exact affliction in a movie in 1960, which I thought was pretty cool. So there you go, another kind of connection between two kind of horror movies. But the whole dressing as his mother and seeing him like dressed as a woman, not that it was necessarily cutting edge, but to see him like that as a crazy murderer seemed a little edgy to me. I mean, when I saw it on screen and it kind of shocked me, even though I knew it was coming. When you see him walk in, like in that, in her wig and dress and stuff, it's pretty fucking chilling to watch that even today.
Yeah, it sort of highlights the confusion of everyone going, like, what's happening? Like, they just discovered, the corpse in the chair, and then this, totally unexpected, Vision dressed in this wig that's kind of like half falling off, and this dress that doesn't fit come flailing in the room, and they just sort of like wrestle for a while. So yeah, it's a really sort of just startling reveal. I think there were some maybe movies dealing with transvestites or some sort of gender swapped maybe killer in like the noir movies, but I'm not 100% sure at this point. So this may have been new.
Is that like the Maltese Falcon crest or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there are I think one of the things that's so influential about Psycho is that it takes some of these concepts and it puts them not only in the realm of horror, but also sort of in accessible, everyone knows about it horror. Like, split personalities are something that there was a little stretch there where you had like that was kind of like a fun concept for people to explore. I think just a few years before that you had the Three Faces of Eve. So we had some films like that. there were some transvestite movies from beforehand, but they were not flattering, and I wouldn't. I mean, obviously, that's very different than like transgender or even psychosis or split personalities. Very different things, and I want to make sure to lampshade that very, very heavily. But but you did have movies that that did play with the concept of the the male female gender division and those who cross it as being either freaks or as being dangerous. So this film here is very influential just in terms of how it puts all of these elements together in this almost timeless time capsule. And I think part of what makes it, what also leads to its timelessness is, and JP says Glenn or Glinda in chat, and that was the one that immediately came to my mind. But this film was shot in black and white. This was not, I mean, there were films from before this that were, that were presenting in CinemaScope. And I think it's something about the fact that this film stayed black and white, I think helps make it feel so eternal. Like, it doesn't feel like, sometimes when you watch an old, like a CinemaScope or an old Technicolor film, like it looks washed out or it looks like it feels old. The black and white nature of this film, like, I mean, honestly, it could be a student art project film. Like, it's I think that's a fascinating aspect of it, and it's one of the things that I most enjoy.
Well, it seems like we're all pretty on board the Psycho train. We all like this movie a lot, and it seems to hold up pretty well. So if for some reason you haven't seen Psycho yet, or maybe even if it's been 20 years since you've seen Psycho, now may be a good time to go back and check it out again. Kind of like reconnecting with an old friend who's trying to kill you. It can be fun for a little while, but batten down the hatches, because craziness, no doubt, will ensue. Speaking of craziness ensuing, oh my God, you guys, are you ready to talk about Mother?
Yeah. We should talk about how we picked these two movies last week, like, and how that turned out.
Do it, Jim. Go for it.
Well, I mean, we had, none of us had seen Mother yet, I don't think, when we talked about this last week. We said, what can we see with Mother? And we had just seen the Bates Motel, and we're thinking of like mother themes, and we're like, oh yeah, this movie looks kind of crazy. It might be a horror movie. Let's pair it with Psycho and see how that goes. And of course, now that I've seen both, and I'm not going to spoil anything yet in Mother, because that's a very spoilable movie, and we don't want to go there yet. But they're almost, I mean, they have a little bit of crossover. Like, there's a house in both movies. I'll say that.
Right.
The house there's a prominent house in both movies. But it's not, well, that's all right. There isn't as much of a tie-in as I thought there would be, but still fun to talk about a classic like Psycho.
Will, did you have a thought? I saw you like.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like, the more I think about it, the more, like, obviously these are two very, very different films, but there is a thematic tie between the two. I don't think we can talk about the thematic tie yet. We'll have to wait till we get to our spoiler section for that.
Oh,
so I think, like, after inspection, I went through the same kind of, like, at first, just kind of like, are these going to fit? And I thought about it a little more and thought, you know what? I see some parallels. I think we're going to get into some interesting conversation on this one.
Good point. Let's remember to circle back to those connections, those thematic connections.
Indeed. All right. Well, guys, we're going to go ahead and make that transition. Chris Lopez, sexy voice of the Movie Bros podcast. We have a favor to ask of you. Are you ready?
I am ready, Brad.
Oh, chills again. Can you give us a little verbal segue into our Mother section in your sexy voice?
All right. So Mother is the new Darren Aronofsky film. And I hadn't heard about it until last week when I was at the movies and this trailer came on. And I was like, what? Because I like to think that I'm on top of film, but apparently I didn't know that this was coming out. And the trailer looked really really interesting because it was so tense and so like I didn't know exactly what was going on, but it had J-Law and it had Javier Bardem, and I knew that I was definitely in. I'm a big fan of Aronofsky, and I love those two actors, so I needed to see it. So I saw it Saturday morning, and yep, and we'll talk about it very soon.
It's awesome that you mentioned that trailer because it is kind of a crazy trailer to sort of suss out what's going on. So all of that said, Jim, I think this is a perfect opportunity, at least for our digital tape delay listeners, for you to go in and maybe play the trailer for them. What do you think? Can you do that?
Yes, of course I can do that. Let's
all
do
right.
it right here.
Well, then we're going to go ahead for our live listeners. You're just going to hear some silence for a minute for you digital tape delay folks. That trailer will kick in. But here we go. Our discussion of Mother. All right, so we're going to talk about Mother spoiler-free for a little bit. Then we'll give you a fair warning before we go into spoilers. I say a little bit because it's going to be exceptionally difficult to talk about this movie without spoiling things. So we may just call it 5 minutes and boom, we're good. But if you haven't seen this film yet, don't worry. We're not going to spoil you right away. We will give you a warning. If you at least want to hear a general impression, do we think it's worth seeing? That we can give you before we make that transition. Chris, in his super sexy voice, did an awesome introduction of that crazy trailer. I'm curious from your perspective, as you kind of spool out spoiler-free what this movie is and if it's worth seeing. Did that trailer pull you in? Did it make you super interested, or do you feel like there's a disassociation between the two? Where do you come down?
Yeah, so this is, you mentioned before, this is going to be a very difficult one for us to discuss in the non-spoiler section. And that's because this film has some very complex and very heavy things that it goes over, things that I think would be lessened if they were revealed in the trailer. And so this is an intentionally vague trailer that highlights more just some of the sequences and maybe some of the mystery of the film without really diving into what that mystery is. For me, the trailer is effective. They're going for a marketing thing of, I think I've seen things like we look forward to refunding your ticket, or this movie will mess you up for life. Like they're really leaning into just how rough this movie is in terms of like its intensity. This is a very intense film. This is at times an unrelenting and even brutal film. You mentioned Chris mentioned the basic plot of this. You've got Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem, and I think what you can say about them is they live in this house together, and he is a poet who has created this great piece and is now looking for his next inspiration as he writes it. When along come these uninvited guests in the form of Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer, and things escalate from there. That's all I'm going to give you guys on plot synopsis. We'll talk more in a moment. In terms of whether this film is good, I loved this movie so much. We'll see how the rest of the year goes, but I mean, it's a top 10 end of year candidate for me. Like it's in the running. This film is not going to be for everyone. Probably more so than any movie I've seen this year. Like if someone, and I've had conversations with people who have said, I hated this movie and here's why. More so than pretty much any movie I've probably ever discussed. I've just said, okay, I get it. I understand that. This is a movie that relies on a lot of narrative ambiguity and allegory and things like that. This is a movie that is, and I mentioned it briefly, brutal and intense and uncomfortable, and those sequences might be off-putting to people. This is the type of movie that has some very specific themes that are not necessarily going to appeal to all audiences either. And because of all of that, like it's very, very specific on what it goes through. It's not going to be for everyone. It is for me. I love Aronofsky's work to begin with. I think that this is maybe not his best work. I still think that I mean, with a guy who's put out films like The Fountain and Requiem for a Dream and Black Swan and The Wrestler, for a film to come out and maybe not be immediately his first isn't necessarily a problem. But no, I love this movie, but I can't recommend it for all people. You have to like fucked up shit, and you have to be okay with really taking your time to suss out a film. You have to be okay with both of those things to even have a remote chance of liking this movie. But I'm really, really, really interested in hearing what you guys have to say.
So big old hearty recommendation from Will then, for sure.
Chris, hold on. I don't know if it's a hearty recommendation. It's a hearty like with a casual recommendation. I don't know how to
Yeah, there's a difference between the recommendation and how much he loved the film, I think what we're saying.
Yeah, so, and I don't know how to codify that.
To be clear then, it's maybe a recommendation for people who have enjoyed Aronofsky's previous works or like something a little mindfucky and are okay with things not necessarily being 100% spoon-fed connected.
I think that's definitely it. You know, that there are people who I think this will not be the right movie for, and I would not recommend. There's people in my life I would never recommend this to. Like I would say, just don't go see this movie. This is not the movie for you. But for people who kind of share the same sensibilities as I do or like those types of things, like, you know, go see it now.
All right. Awesome. Chris, you said you saw this on Saturday and that you liked it. Do you feel similar to Will? Like this is only for a certain audience? Do you diverge? What's your thought there?
So yeah, I think Will hit it on the nose when he said it's fucked up shit. Throughout the movie, it's very uncomfortable, and that only mounts once you get to the second half, when then you're just sort of like overwhelmed by so much going on. But that sort of sense of being overwhelmed and being lost for me felt almost magical, because I think that's kind of an experience that you can really only get at a really well done movie, and I wouldn't trade that for the world. And I think that's a fantastic experience that, you know, if you can stand that fucked up shit, it's totally worth the ticket price. But not just fucked up shit is the core takeaway from the movie. I think the acting is really, really well done. And it kind of has to be. Aronofsky kind of focuses the camera like on Jennifer Lawrence's face, like center frame, for like at least half the movie. And so like everything is detailed in like the subtle movement of her eyes or her smile or anything like that. And it's just everyone, like, you know, Harvey Bardem, Michelle Pfeiffer was fantastic. And the story is weird because, like Will said, you kind of have to think about it. You kind of have to pull it apart a little bit. It's not too hidden once you think about it for a little bit, and then you're just like, oh, of course. But it's not obvious, and it's not like you said, Brett, spoon fed. So there's a little bit of work, but totally worth the effort, totally worth the payoff.
All right. So some high praise so far. Chris, thank you. Jim, are you kind of coming in at a similar place then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty differently here. Like, yeah.
I like the movie. Walking out of it, you know, while we were walking out of it. And the more I think about it, the more I think I appreciate this movie for the ideas that it's presenting and the way it's presenting them in this kind of, that's all I'll say for now. And then again, I know people who are film people, and they've seen a lot of movies. They've seen a lot of fucked up shit movies, and they did not like this movie. They hated it because they felt it was too, being too obvious and on the nose. And that's cool. But I also think that this is a movie you have to go into, you're best going into knowing as little about it as you can, or a little about its ideas as you can, and what it's trying to do. Because once you know that, I think the movie could come off much, much differently, and a little obvious. I will say it didn't work like that on me. I like you, Chris. I was well into the movie, trying to figure out what the fuck. It's uncomfortable to watch. You mentioned the close-ups. There's a ton of like the camera is so like claustrophobic. It's like that person who's like always in your personal space. That's what this movie felt like to me, and that heightens the tension of the whole movie. And then fucked up stuff starts happening, and it gets worse. But the least you know about this movie, I just think it works better. And like I said, I was probably 2/3 of the way through the movie before I was toward the end, before I was really starting to figure out what was going on. I'm like, oh shit, everything I just saw. Now it starts, all the pieces kind of fall into place. And I love movies that can do that to me. But you definitely don't want to know that going in, because I think it would be a different experience. Yeah, I really love the movie. Like Will, I don't know if I would recommend this movie to everybody, because if you go in and you're expecting something like, a horror movie like It, or Annabelle Creation, you maybe I could totally see a couple going in on a date night and seeing this movie and then standing up at the end and walking out, or saying this movie sucks and walk out. But I just love the big ideas that this movie goes for and the way it presents them. And it's got a lot to unpack, which I hope we'll get into in spoilers.
I'm sure we will.
Mm-hmm.
So the high praise train continues. It puts a lot of pressure on me. So much pressure. Maybe I need a dedicated close-up to simulate how crazy this is right now. So here's what I'll say. I don't think I came in at the same level you guys did. I mean, I liked watching the movie. I think it had some interesting metaphorical things that it does. But I don't know. I don't think it really like transported me or made me go like, oh my God, this is one of the best movies of the year. I will say I liked it better than Black Swan, and Jim knows my history with Black Swan. So that's actually incredibly high praise.
You're wrong, Brad. You're wrong.
Side note, this means we need to revisit Black Swan in a future episode.
No.
All right, let's go back.
Please. No. Oh my God. If I never have to, well, never mind.
Wow.
In any event, I will say though, I mean, even though I didn't come to the same level you guys did, I did enjoy watching the movie. Jennifer Lawrence can sometimes be a little hit or miss. I feel like she did a really great job here. I love Javier Bardem in pretty much anything that I see him in. And it was nice, having him in this film. He had something meaty to work with. Michelle Pfeiffer, I don't know what's been going on for her lately. I can't even remember the last movie I saw with her in it. But I was getting some like aged school teacher from Dangerous Minds vibes from her in this film, which I actually really appreciated. And Ed Harris, I've got to tell you guys, I know this is bad. This is like my brain not being able to operate, but I had a really hard time separating Ed Harris from his Westworld performance, which we recently got to see, and his performance in this film. There's certain parts where he like stands a certain way or holds his head a certain way, and I'm expecting him to like, murder whores in a whorehouse. So I had a little bit of trouble blocking some of that from my brain. I did really love seeing the Gleason brothers show up in this film, though. I think we need more of the Gleason family in general in film. So especially because they're all super fucking hot gingers. So, they've got that going for them in addition to their acting skills. But you guys are absolutely right. There's so much to unpack here, and I don't want to take more time away from that than we need to. So we're going to move into spoilers pretty much right away, guys. I'm not going to awkwardly bumble for very long here. So if you haven't seen Mother yet, it sounds like we're all pretty well agreed. Like, if you're going to see it, maybe avoid the spoiler section. Because I tell you what, I think if I had Wikipedia'd the plot for this thing before I saw the film, I wouldn't have wanted to see the film. Like, it would have been, didn't work. So save yourself from that, maybe. But spoilers, guys, are officially fair game. Where do we want to start?
I think we need to start with what this movie is actually about, because that was the one thing we really couldn't talk about in the previous section, and that I think most people get walked out of, and they either had a grasp or an understanding of what it was about, or there are people that walked out of it and had no idea, and I think that might lead to some of the frustrations people have had with it. But this movie is actually, it's interesting that this is the film of Aronofsky's that immediately follows Noah, because it has some of the exact same themes of Noah. Like when we talked about Noah, that was a biblical movie with an environmental message. And here we have a movie that is a biblical movie with an environmental message. The characters in this are literally, what if God and Mother Earth lived in a house together? Like that's the one sentence kind of weird description of this movie. Jennifer Lawrence is Earth personified. Javier Bardem is this as a, and this is why I think some people might also take issue with this, is a narcissistic God who has created this wonderful thing, this Earth, this paradise, as they call their house. And he's working on his next creation. Then along come Adam and Eve in the form of Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer, who find the, who basically break this glass orb of Javier Bardem's, of God's, and immediately that's the original sin. They start fucking in the house, just left and right. Then the Gleason brothers, those hot gingers that Brad was talking about, show up, and they Cain and Abel each other all over. We have a bunch of random humans showing up in the house at that point, and it's bedlam. And then one of them breaks the sink, and we have a great flood. We have immaculate conception. We have the birth of a savior figure. We have
the expulsion from the Garden of Eden, which was the room where the thing was. Yep.
We have the Eucharist in this movie, where they actually devour the flesh of the baby. We have,
which I don't know if you saw this in the live chat, Will, but JB says the dead baby caused a mass walkout in the theater he saw this in.
Oh, yeah, and I believe that. Like this is a film that, like, it's fucked up scenes. Like this is not Audition. This is not Martyrs. This is not a Serbian film. There are more, air quotes, fucked up movies than this. But this one also, like, I mean, there's two sequences in particular. The death and devouring of the baby, and then there's a scene where humanity, that's who it is, just relentlessly beats the shit out of Jennifer Lawrence's character. And we see her face just like swollen and bruised, and like it's hard to watch, like and that's the thing, it's hard to talk around, but like, people who are bothered by violence against women, like obviously this has a very important message of humanity doesn't give a shit about planet Earth. We are destroying our environment. And at the end, she's going to destroy us all. None of us are going to get out of this alive, except for maybe God, who has the ability to maybe start over from scratch. But at the same time, on screen, we do physically see a woman being assaulted by other people. And I think that there is a legitimate cause for some people to say that's not something I want to see in my films.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. I mean, I think that the mother character, she's the spirit of the earth, right? She made a big mistake in not summoning 5 special young people from different continents to take up her name with magic rings that control the elements.
Wait a minute. Is this the prequel to Captain Planet?
I think that's why most people walked out. There were no superheroes in this movie.
I mean, if Matee had just showed up at a certain point and been like, hi, like everything would have been better, right?
But little did they know that we had the biggest superhero of all in this movie, and he's a fucking asshole. No, but I there were so many things in this movie that I didn't really catch at the time, and I was reading something, and I'm like, did you guys catch the global warming thing? Kristen Wiig is walking through the house for some reason, shooting people in the head, and she says, "Is it getting warm in here?"
Yeah.
Like just randomly. I'm like, wow, that was really random. And I never would have put that stuff together. And then there's stuff in here that's still a mystery to me. And I don't think the director or anybody has answered the question of like, what is that yellow shit that she was taking a drink of like every time to like kind of calm her down? That looked like a prescription or a prescription bottle, and she had tons of them. I'm not sure if that was ever explained. I'm sure there are ideas, but
it wasn't. The closest that I've gotten to it, and I saw a quote from him that that sort of led me towards it. There is a what's the story?
It's a poem or something.
Yeah, The Yellow Wallpaper, which is a kind of a Victorian story about a woman sort of going through a similar-ish thing with like she's in captivity in this house and she's going mad staring at this yellow wallpaper, and then there's paranoia, and then there's the control of man as a thing. I heard him say a quote basically like the best answer I've gotten from him so far, because I went looking for this one, like that was the one I didn't have a good grasp on. He said it actually goes back to some Victorian roots, but you guys should totally ask Jennifer Lawrence, because she has a better answer to that than I do. And then I couldn't find Jennifer Lawrence asking for it. So that little tie there was what got me towards The Yellow Wallpaper. That was the best I could come up with. So I could be wrong on that. I don't know.
So I don't know. I did a little researching myself, and meth is often a yellow like powder or rocky substance as well. So maybe, you know, Mother Earth had to do some natural meth to like deal with what was going on. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was just some shocking. I mean, we talked about the baby, talked about Kristen Wiig coming in. I don't know who she was supposed to be, but she was like came in and was like just when she started shooting people in the head. That was pretty shocking to me that happened. And so, and I could see people walking out at that. I just wonder if this movie, if you're not ever in tune with this big idea, and his main and this movie seems to come out of anger, right? The director is angry. He's like, can you people see what we're doing to this world? And it's kind of a mixture of things to get upset about, not just environmental shit that's going, you know, what humankind is doing to the earth, and we don't care. We don't seemingly care, but like all the false idol worship that we have going on, right? All the people coming to the house trying to take get a piece of God that they can, you know, bring back with them. And I just loved the way that he portrayed those big ideas. As I said though at the beginning, I think if you went into this movie knowing that, it might seem a little on the nose. A lot of that stuff could seem a little on the nose. And I've had friends that have come and told me that it was the worst Aronofsky movie they saw because it was too on the nose. But I wonder. I asked one of them. I said, "So, what did you know about this movie going in?" And I think they had probably read some things.
Which leads to me to actually a really good question for you guys. What scene in the movie did you get it? Like, at what point did the light bulb go off for you?
Yeah, for me, I didn't get it until after the movie. I left the movie kind of thinking it was a metaphor just on creation and inspiration and art as a whole, and kind of the artist using and abusing the love of people around him to get inspired, become self-involved, create something great, and kind of move on. And so I left the movie kind of thinking that was pretty obvious. And then, like later on, I was like, wait, what about this and this and this and this and this? And then it all perfectly pieced together, you know, the stories of the Bible. And so it did take me a little while. I guess I'm a little slower than most people. But yeah, like Jim, like this morning, someone sent me a Reddit article and was like, is this what this movie is really about? I haven't seen it yet. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You just totally ruined it for yourself.
Chris, I got to ask you, is this the Reddit post that was like Mother for Dummies? And it was like written very like wisecrackingly, like
it was like, yo, this motherfucker God or whatever. It's like, yeah.
I need to read this.
Here's the problem. I was going to read a snippet from this Reddit article. I just went to pull it up and the post got removed. all the like 5,000 comments are still there, but the original post is gone.
That's weird.
Like, the text was removed. Yeah, I'll put the link in our chat if anyone wants to go and maybe check out the comments. Feel free. But yeah, the text of the original post was removed, and it was so entertaining.
Oh my god, I love stuff like that.
Yeah, it's good to read after. We're emphasizing read it after.
After, yeah,
not
like
before you see the movie. As I said before, the least you know about this movie. But to answer your question, Chris, no, you're not slower than most.
No.
I didn't start to catch on until, I mean, I knew some weird shit was going on. And I thought about the, the artist and his devotion to his art and the people around him supporting him with, no matter what. I thought about that, but I'm like, it's just not really holding together that much at that level for me. And then when he walks out with the baby and the people are just starting to like worship it, and I'm like, oh, all right,
Yeah.
I get it. And then of course at the very end, what really cemented it for me is when she's dying, right? She blows up the house. She's dying in her last breaths, and he's there. He's not burned at all, and he's like, "Don't worry, I can just create. It's what I do." And he's talking to her, and as soon as he said "create," I'm like, "Oh yeah, I get it now. I get what he's supposed to be." And then from there, I kind of retroactively kind of pieced the rest together.
What was your light bulb moment, Brad?
I think for me it was when Michelle Pfeiffer kept wanting to like go into the study, and J Law's like, no, you can't do that. And then what ends up happening, of course, is that she does go in, and they go in and they break the heart, right? And I think that's where it really started to kind of crack open this nutshell for me, and then just little additional things started adding up, like when he boards up the door. I'm like, yep, okay, God, Eden, Adam and Eve, got it.
Get the fuck out of my garden. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then, of course, that's when the hot Gleason brothers show up. And I'm like, oh, Cain and Abel. And so at that point, I think my brain started like working ahead. And it's like, oh, okay, what's going to come next? Got to be the flood. Oh, look, hey, there's the flood allegory. What's next? Hey, Jesus. Oh, look, Jesus is being born. Especially when like they have sex and J-Law wakes up and she's like, oh, I am pregnant. And he's like, how do you know? And she's like, I just know. I'm like, all right. And of course,
that was weird.
Yeah, right. And it gets spooled out more and more, of course, as we go. You mentioned the really cool scene at the end where Jim says, by the way, that heating oil would not have created that kind of explosion. But she fireballs the house. Boom, it's obliterated. And, basically God, who has already taken everything from her, has to take one more thing, reaches into her chest, takes out her heart, and then resets this whole thing. I've been thinking the last couple of days, and I've avoided reading reviews of the film because I didn't want anyone to color my thoughts on what it could be, about the last thing we see, which is Mother Earth waking up now that things have been reset, and it's not Jennifer Lawrence anymore.
Right.
It's a different girl. And I was, coming out of the movie, I'm like, what? I've gone along with all of your metaphors, Aronofsky. Like, why does this final one have to trip me out? And I'm curious. So do you think that's because, like, when we fuck up Earth, we can maybe try to put things back together, but they're never going to be the same as they were? Is that what that's a metaphor for? Or is it something else?
Well, I think that this movie is... And Jim said the words before, like, this is a very angry movie. I definitely saw that less as like a Hope Springs Eternal type ending, and more of the fact that, regardless of whether or not this creator who is above everything is able to begin again, and in this case he has with the heart. He's done this probably countless times. We are all dead. Our Earth is dead. Once we go down this path, we are fucked. And you guys mentioned something before that I wanted to also bring up at this point, which is Jim and Chris, you both said like, oh, I was a little slower on the uptake or what have you, like that, about the creator element of it, that you thought it was like a story about like kind of this narcissistic artist type thing. And I would actually say that you're actually right in that interpretation as well. Like I don't think we went the wrong direction at all. Like Aronofsky's view of religion is not a favorable one. Like he sees the drama in it, obviously, but he sees God as a narcissistic creator who created this thing and then immediately destroys it in pursuit of the next thing. That is a very tough worldview of religion, and not something that people would easily relate to. Brad, I think I was around the same time as you. Like when the twins started fighting, that was definitely like, I was like, okay, that's Cain and Abel. Let me work back from this. Let me work forward from this. The scene right after the flood where like everyone's kicked out of the house and she says, I'm going to clean up this apocalypse. I was like, well, that's a very specific word to use.
Little on the nose there, Aronofsky.
Yeah, but it could have been just her trying to be like pseudo funny. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to clean up this apocalypse.
Yeah, I think it works on those multiple levels. And like one of the things about this movie that's just like so uncomfortable is as the house is filling with people and she's telling people don't sit on the sink, and then they immediately get back up on it.
And they start bouncing on it.
That it's just so frustrating to watch. Like this movie in general is not like, doesn't make you feel good watching it. It definitely challenges you all the time, and you're feeling like crazy as everything is sort of coming in and just sort of pressing on you from all sides.
So I'm glad that you bring that up, Chris, because Jim, you may know exactly where I'm going.
I know exactly where you're going.
So Jim, why don't you tell it from your perspective?
Well, I mean, this movie is totally like for certain personality types or people who have certain traits. This movie is a huge, forget all the biblical stuff, like put that aside, put all the Old Testament stuff aside. This movie could be a huge trigger for somebody. There's a lot of anxiety it built just into the basic screenplay of this movie. We talked about the claustrophobic camera. Now you got these like house guests who won't leave your shit alone. And they just don't, they won't go. Things just keep getting out of control. More people come in. It's kind of like, especially for control freaks, this movie, I think, is a huge trigger. Like if you have any control freak in you, or the more control freak you have in you, I think this movie can make you really, really uncomfortable. And not that Brad's a super control freak, but we've had this discussion before about having like big parties in the house. And Brad, I'm sorry if I offend you, but it makes you nervous to know that we're going to have a ton of people in the house, like, and whether it's from trying to be a good party host or just trying to keep kind of a lid on things. That's a hard thing to get over. And this movie totally, like, this director just like keeps punching you in the face with that stuff.
Well, yeah, and Jim, you mentioned I kind of have a proclivity toward that already. We threw a big, and I won't mention names or anything, but we threw a big party for Jim's most recent decade birthday milestone, and we probably had. All right, for Jim's 50th birthday, we threw a big pool party, and I thought, we're going to have 50 people at the house. They're going to be outside most of the time. It'll be fine. Well, all of these people, God love them, are coming into the house. We have cats. There's a big sign on the door. This is, please keep the screen door closed. Don't let our cats out. What do people do? They leave the fucking screen door open. And then, like, the person going in, I'm like, hey, could you please do me a favor and keep that closed? Oh, yeah, sure. No problem. 5 minutes later, they're walking out with another beer. What do they fucking do? They leave the screen door open after I just told them not to jump on the sink because it isn't braced yet. They're doing it.
They're doing that. They're starting wars in the living room.
Right,
like, Kristen Wiig shows up with the shotgun and you're just like, fuck, it's on.
Right. So as I'm watching this film, that's probably the thing that I appreciated most about this film. And hated in a weird way. I hated feeling those feelings because it took me right back to that, right back to those triggers. Like when J-Law's like screaming and like the camera fuzzes out around the corners and everything's shaking. Like that's how I felt.
During childbirth, yeah.
Yeah, it's well, and yeah. So, like, there was one point where I had to like go out to the garage during that birthday party and just like have a freak out moment to like get it out. Like,
Oh, no.
people, come on, you know. So I think this movie does an incredible job, and a lot of it is, you know, owed to stylistic director choices, I'm sure, but of just making you feel that anxiety and that tension, and then you kind of uses it as a launching off point, right, into this metaphorical message about God and creation and shitty fucking people. So not my favorite movie ever, but I do really appreciate what it tried to do here.
But the movie is also saying that we are the shitty people, Brad. Remember that.
Oh, I'm well aware. Absolutely.
We're not we're the ones fucking everything up for Mother Earth.
Hey, so question in the live chat, Edward Chambers says, okay, so wait, if Brad is Mother Earth, Jim is God, who is Will?
My answer is I'm not in that biblical equation. I am Galactic Lord Xenu. Sacrifice your thetans to me. Wait, is that how it works? I don't even know.
Oh goodness, that was too good not to mention.
You know, those up close shots that you mentioned, like, they were so good. This movie has over an hour of its like gosh, what does it have? Like just over 2 hours. So about half of this movie is done in, and I'm not exaggerating, like, you know, it's actually 60 of the 120 something minutes are done in full close up of Jennifer Lawrence's face, with the remainder of this film being done in sort of like a close, like kind of like a mid-range shot over her shoulder, so that you're kind of seeing not quite POV, but you are still seeing things from her POV, or at least from her from where she's at in the house. It reminds me most that claustrophobic feeling. There is a brilliant movie, and I think we've talked about it on this show, called Son of Saul, which came out a few years ago, which is shot almost entirely over this guy's shoulder. And there were long sections of it that reminded me of this. Like, I kept, like, there's a part of me that kept screaming for like a faraway shot, because I like, not because it would have made it a better movie. No, I think the choices were good, but because just like I needed like a break from the tension. I needed to see like an establishing shot of some trees, or let's see a lake for a moment, or let's see a car driving down the road. And we never get that because we are meant to be on edge, and we're meant to be as angry and unsettled as Aronofsky all the way through this. That's another little point about this movie that just like has me raving happy for it.
Yeah, and I just want to mention the scene, the second part of the movie, once the house starts getting filled with devoted fans coming in to see the new work. I thought that escalation was handled supremely well. Just it sort of like bold, you know, as like a small boulder coming up from the top of the snow hill until this like huge like snowball at the bottom, so fast, so unexpected. And but it's not just that people started showing up at the house. It's sort of the phases of history that start happening as people sort of develop religion and start becoming fanatical about it. And then that fanaticism drives wedges into the community, so that now there's two people that start fighting over different things, and those fights escalate, and that war and that chaos that surrounds everything and everybody in that house, again, also super uncomfortable to watch. You know, everyone's mentioning Kristen Wiig capping people in the back of the head. That was yeah, that was just a small part of the craziness that was just going on seemingly at all sides. And it would be like Jennifer Lawrence turns left and there's like a dance or a rave starting to happen, and then she turns right and then people are like, you know, doing signs of the cross or ripping up pieces of furniture all around the house. And that sort of second half of the movie, when that starts getting crazy, was just when I was sold, and I fell in love with the movie at that point.
Yeah, that was pretty. That ramp up in that, I'll call it the second half, was just crazy. And now that I think back on it, there was symbolism all over that house that if you go back and watch the movie, it would be fun just to pick out some of the stuff that's laid in there. There was like the window lights on the door were arranged in a cross, you know, and the spot in the floor to me looked like like
A vagina.
A vagina.
Yeah.
But I don't know what that was. I don't even know what the whole secret room in the basement was supposed to represent. That was very weird. I didn't understand why that even was there, but I'm sure there's an explanation. If somebody has it, please mention it in chat. But yeah, just there's so many layers to this movie when you think back on it. Maybe someday I'll catch up with this movie again and rewatch it, knowing what I watch. Hopefully I'll appreciate it as much, if not more, when I get to kind of pick some things apart and see, oh, that's what they were going for. Because at the time they might have just like flew right past me,
Sure.
without knowing what was going on.
Indeed. All right. Well, we are a little long in the tooth, guys, and I know, Chris, it's a little bit later where you are. How do we feel about maybe moving on to some plugs as we look to wrap this thing up?
Yeah, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Chris, why don't you get us started? Anything you want to plug for our listeners, even if it's plugging yourself, that's totally fine.
Well, it's been a little while since I plugged myself, but I'll go ahead and start with the comic that I've been doing lately. It's Signal and Silence. I have a Tumblr for it at signalandsilence.tumblr.com. Due for an update very soon. I've been working on it. So I've been posting entire chapters as I finish writing them. So it can go a little while or a long while in between chapters, but I keep on trying, and I'll be finished hopefully soon-ish, so probably early next year.
All right. Awesome. Well, Chris, we'll definitely make sure to get that link in the show notes. Listeners, if you want to check that out, be sure to hit up that link. It'll take you right there. Let's move on down to Will. Will, what have you got this week?
Yeah, so the thing that I want to plug is something that has got me really, really excited right now. It's actually a Fantastic Fest tie-in, but a few years ago, actually my first year there, I met this filmmaker named Maddie Doe. She was that was her first film at the festival. She's the first female director from Laos. It's the first female director in all of Laos. With this film called Chantilly, which played back in 2013. And it was great. Had great conversations with her. I befriended her. She's a cool person. And she came out with another film called Dearest Sister, which played last year at the festival, and is, as of today, has been picked up and is Laos's first submission to the Oscars for a foreign language spot. So I'm plugging a friend. Go see this movie. It's not in theaters, but it is on Shudder, the horror streaming site. It's called Dearest Sister, and it's this neat little slow burn about this woman who's caring for this kind of this blind woman who is richer than her, and the blind woman has the ability to communicate with the dead and to cause kind of great fortune, but also with a great cost along with it. Cool movie, and it's still in that stage where, like, where every country is submitting their Oscar pick, so it's not like one of the 5 foreign language nominees. We won't know what that is for months and months and months, but it's just exciting to see someone who, who's been at this little festival I go to and who likes my Instagram photos and stuff like that to be in the running for an Oscar. That's so exciting for me. So Dearest Sister by Maddie Doe, go watch it.
All right. Awesome. And I've got a joint plug for both Jim and myself. I know we're both really looking forward to a movie coming out this weekend. I don't know if we're going to get a chance to see it this weekend, but that, of course, is Kingsman: The Golden Circle is coming out. Jim, I know you really enjoyed the first one. Yes?
I love the first one, actually. I was pleasantly surprised by the first one.
Me too. So I can't wait to see the second one and catch up with what's going on with Eggsy. Although we're going to be at Fantastic Fest over the course of this weekend and all of next week. So definitely go out, see Kingsman: The Golden Circle. Whether we're going to talk about it on the show or not next week remains to be seen. Since we're going to be at Fantastic Fest, we may do, I don't know, we may take a couple different tracks. We may do a series of just out of the movies. Here's our thoughts on what we're seeing. Recordings we spliced together for you guys. I don't know. We'll figure it out. In any event, Will, Can't wait to see it in a few days.
It's so close.
I know. Super excited. And Chris, we definitely got to work on getting you out for a film festival with us at some point soon, for sure. But I just got to say, Chris, man, it has felt like old times tonight. What a gift this was, you coming back and reviewing not one, but two films with us. Thank you so much for being here. It was really a blast.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was great to hang out with you guys again.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to have more ideas, especially on a movie like this that has just so many things to unpack. There's probably another, half dozen or dozen we didn't even touch on.
Unlike the themes of this movie, Chris, you're always welcome in this home.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, that is totally true. Chris, thanks again for joining us. We'll get that link up in the show notes for anyone who wants to check out the amazingness that is Signal and Silence. Guys, that is a wrap for us this week. Final thing, though, before we hit the disconnect button. Jim, if people want to find and interact with you online, where can they do so?
Find me on Twitter at JJPOutWest. That's all one word, at JJPOutWest. That's in addition to our Twitter account, by the way. That's at Movie Bears Podcast or MB Podcast. Sorry, right?
There you go, MB
at
Podcast.
MB Podcast. You can also find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
Rock on. Will, how about you?
Hey, if you want to see what porn I accidentally like, just like Ted Cruz, check me out at Whatever Cove. And that's on Twitter. Come to Facebook and find me. I'm William Lindis. I'm the one with bear friends, not the one who who doesn't.
Not boring straight fuck friends. Oh shit! Did I say
Whoa.
Yes. And also check me out on Letterboxd, which is where I go to talk about and share movies I've seen. Just look for William Lindis, and you should be able to find me there.
All right, awesome. And of course, Chris, we know we can go to signalandsilence.tumblr.com. But in addition to that, if folks want to find you, where can they reach out?
On Facebook, you'll probably find me liking Movie Bears podcast post as Chris Lopez. And you can tweet at me at OSOArt, OSOART. Don't use it a whole lot, but if you tweet at me, I'll get the notification.
Bam. All right. Excellent. And you guys can find me on Facebook. I am the Brad Harris that is not a gun-toting, gun nut person with a Confederate flag behind them in their profile picture. I don't know if they changed the profile picture last week because I mention it every week to make it even more obvious that it's not me, but it should be easy for you to differentiate which one is me.
Hey, do you think that other Brad Harris has a podcast? And when he gives his plug at the end, he says, I am not the bearded homosexual movie lover that is Brad Harris. I am the gun-toting one. He probably has a gun podcast.
That would be some like Aronofsky version, like somewhere out there, American Tail metaphor shit going on, if that were the case.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
In any event, say hi on Facebook if you like, or find me on Twitter if you're watching the video version of the podcast. My Twitter handle is right here on the screen. It's at iBradPro for anyone who maybe is listening on digital tape delay. We'll see you all next time. Have a great week, everybody. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.